When I got on the train, I froze in shock. There was my husband directly in front of me, the same man who had been declared dead a year ago. My breath caught in my throat, my hands trembled uncontrollably, and for a moment I thought I was losing my mind. David. My David. Sitting there in a gray coat I had never seen before, reading a newspaper like nothing had ever happened, like he had not shattered my entire world when they lowered his casket into the ground 12 months ago. The train lurched forward, and I grabbed onto a pole to steady myself, my knees threatening to give out beneath me. The fluorescent lights above flickered and hummed, casting harsh shadows across the faces of commuters lost in their phones and books. But all I could see was him. The curve of his jaw, the way his left eyebrow lifted slightly when he concentrated, the small scar above his right eye from when he fell off his bike as a kid. Every detail was exactly as I remembered, exactly as I had mourned. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am 34 years old. I live in Manchester, England, where the rain falls more often than not, and the streets are always busy with people rushing to somewhere more important. I work as a primary school teacher, spending my days with children who still believe the world is full of magic and possibility. But for the past year, my world has been gray and empty, a hollow shell of what it used to be. If you are enjoying this story and want to hear more, please click that subscribe button. We are working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Just click the red subscribe button below and become part of this community. David and I met at university when we were both 21, at a terrible house party where the music was too loud and the beer was warm. He spilled his drink on my favorite dress and spent the next hour apologizing and trying to make me laugh. By the end of the night, I had forgiven him. By the end of the month, I was in love. We married 3 years later in a small ceremony in the countryside, surrounded by wildflowers and the people we loved most. We had dreams, plans for children, and a house with a garden where we could grow tomatoes and herbs. We had everything ahead of us. Then came that phone call last October. The police officer's voice was professional but gentle, the tone they must teach them for delivering the worst news imaginable. There had been an accident. A car crash on the M6 motorway during a business trip to Birmingham. David's rental car had collided with a lorry during heavy rain and fog. The vehicle had caught fire. The officer said he died instantly, that he did not suffer. They always say that, do they not? As if it makes the loss any easier to bear. The body was badly burned, they told us. Identification was made through dental records and the personal effects found at the scene, his wallet, his wedding ring, his phone with the screen cracked but still displaying our last text conversation. My mother-in-law Martha insisted on a closed casket funeral. We are remembering him as he was, she said, her face pale and drawn, her hands clutching mine so tightly it hurt. Not like this. Never like this. I stood at that graveside on a cold November morning while the vicar spoke words that meant nothing to me. Martha sobbed into her husband's shoulder. David's younger sister Emma stood frozen and silent, her face a mask of shock. His colleagues from the accounting firm where he worked came in dark suits and said the appropriate things about what a good man he was, how dedicated, how reliable. Reliable. Such a strange word to use about someone who had just vanished from existence. The months that followed were a blur of grief counseling sessions, well-meaning friends who did not know what to say, and sleepless nights where I would reach across the bed for him and find only cold sheets. I went through his clothes, donated most of them to charity, because I could not bear to see his jackets hanging in the closet like ghosts. I kept his favorite jumper, the blue one with the hole in the elbow that he refused to throw away. Some nights I still sleep with it pressed against my face, breathing in the fading scent of his cologne. Martha called me every Sunday, without fail. "How are you managing, dear?" she would ask, her voice thick with her own unprocessed pain. She had lost her son. I had lost my husband. We circled around each other's grief like boxers in a ring, neither of us knowing how to land a blow that would release the pressure building inside us. Emma stopped answering my calls after the first few months. Everyone processes loss differently, the therapist told me. Give her space. Give yourself space. But space was the last thing I wanted. I filled my days with work and my evenings with mindless television and bottles of wine that I knew I should not be finishing alone. I avoided the places David and I used to go, the Italian restaurant where we had our first date, the cinema where we always sat in the back row, the park where he proposed on one knee with a ring he had saved 6 months to buy. Manchester felt haunted, every street corner holding a memory I was not ready to face. Then came this morning, this perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in October, exactly 1 year and 3 days after they buried him. I had woken up late, rushed through my shower, skipped breakfast because I was running behind. The autumn air was crisp and cool as I hurried to the Piccadilly train station, my coat pulled tight against the wind, leaves crunching under my feet in shades of amber and rust. The sky was that particular shade of gray that England does so well, clouds heavy with rain that had not yet decided to fall. If you are finding this story gripping, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your click makes a real difference. Just press that subscribe button now, and you'll be helping us reach that goal together. I bought my ticket from the machine, barely looking at the screen as I tapped my card and grabbed the slip of paper. Platform 3. The train to Liverpool Lime Street, a route I had taken dozens of times to visit my cousin who lived near the waterfront. I was going to spend the day with her, maybe walk along the docks, try to find some piece of normalcy in this anniversary that felt like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to scab over. The platform was crowded with the usual mix of business people in suits checking their watches, university students with oversized backpacks, tourists consulting maps on their phones. I found a spot near the edge, close enough to board quickly when the train arrived but far enough from the crowd to have some breathing room. The digital display above showed 3 minutes until departure. I checked my phone, saw a text from my cousin asking what time I would arrive, and started to type a response. That is when the train pulled in with a screech of brakes and a rush of displaced air. The doors slid open and people began filing off and on in that organized chaos that happens at train stations everywhere. I stepped forward, found an empty carriage, and that is when I saw him. That is when my entire world tilted on its axis and reality stopped making sense. David, standing near the window seats.
Alive.
Breathing.
Real.
I stood frozen in the doorway as other passengers pushed past me with annoyed huffs and muttered complaints. Someone's bag hit my shoulder, but I barely felt it. All I could do was stare at the man who was supposed to be dead, who I had watched them lower into the ground, who I had mourned for 368 days. He looked different somehow, though I could not immediately place why. His hair was shorter, cut in a style he had never worn before, almost military in its precision. He had grown a beard, neatly trimmed but fuller than the stubble he used to maintain. His clothes were wrong too, that gray coat I had never seen, dark jeans instead of his usual khakis, boots instead of the brown leather shoes he wore to the office every day. But it was him. God help me, it was absolutely him. The train lurched forward and I stumbled, catching myself against a seat. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. This could not be happening. This was not possible. People do not come back from the dead. Dental records do not lie. I had been to the funeral. I had thrown dirt on his coffin. I had signed papers and collected his death certificate and filed insurance claims. David Mitchell was dead. Except he was standing right there, not 6 feet away from me, turning the page of his newspaper without a care in the world. I forced myself to move, to walk down the aisle toward him, even though my legs felt like they were made of water. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just someone who looked like him, a coincidence, a cruel trick my grieving brain was playing on me.
People have doppelgangers, right?
I had read about that, how everyone supposedly has 7 people in the world who look exactly like them. This was just one of David's lookalikes. It had to be. But the closer I got, the more certain I became. The small mole on the left side of his neck. The way his fingers tapped against the armrest in a rhythm only he knew. The slight cant of his head when he read. These were not things a stranger would have. These were David's mannerisms, David's movements, David's existence made manifest in front of me. Your subscription to this channel really helps us grow and share more stories like this one. If you have been following along, please take just a second to click subscribe. We are almost at 1,000 subscribers, and you can be part of helping us reach that milestone. Hit that red button now. I stopped right next to his seat, close enough to touch him, close enough to smell the faint scent of coffee and something else, a cologne I did not recognize. He did not look up from his newspaper, did not acknowledge my presence at all. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. What do you say to a ghost? What do you say to a husband who died and came back without telling you? Finally, I managed to choke out one word. David. He did not react, did not even flinch, just continued reading about whatever mundane news story had captured his attention. Maybe he had not heard me over the rattle and hum of the train. Maybe my voice had been too quiet, strangled by shock and disbelief. I tried again, louder this time. David. David, it is me. It is Sarah. This time he looked up, and for a split second, I saw recognition flash across his face. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightened, his hand gripped the newspaper just a fraction tighter. Then, just as quickly, his expression smoothed into something neutral and polite, the look you give a stranger who has mistaken you for someone else. I am sorry, he said, his voice sending ice water through my veins because it was his voice, exactly his voice, the same slightly rough quality from years of teenage smoking he had quit long before we met. I think you have got me confused with someone else. The world tilted. The train car seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in, the air becoming too thick to breathe. I grabbed the back of the seat in front of him to steady myself. No, I said, shaking my head so hard it hurt. No, David, it is me. It is Sarah, your wife. What is happening? What is going on? Everyone thinks you are dead. We had a funeral. We buried you. How are you alive? Where have you been? The other passengers were starting to stare now. A woman across the aisle had her phone out, probably filming this breakdown for social media. A businessman near the door had his hand in his pocket, maybe ready to call for help if I became violent or more hysterical. David, and I knew in my bones it was David despite his denials, looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been annoyance. I really do not know what you are talking about, he said slowly, enunciating each word like I was a child or someone who did not speak English well. My name is not David. You have me confused with someone else. Please leave me alone. He returned his attention to the newspaper, dismissing me as thoroughly as if I had ceased to exist. I stood there trembling, tears burning behind my eyes, my mind racing through possibilities that all seemed equally impossible. Had I gone insane? Was this a hallucination brought on by the anniversary of his death? Was I still in bed, trapped in some vivid nightmare that I would wake from any moment?
But no.
This was real. The train was real. The other passengers were real. And David, or whoever this man claiming not to be David was, he was real too. I will not leave you alone, I said, my voice coming out harder than I intended, sharp with desperation and anger. I do not know what is happening here, but you are my husband. You are David Mitchell. We were married at St. Mary's Church in Cheshire on June 14th, 6 years ago. Your mother is Martha, and your father is Robert, and your sister is Emma. You worked at Henderson and Associates as an accountant. Your favorite food is Thai curry, and you are allergic to shellfish. You have a scar on your right knee from when you crashed your bike when you were 9 years old. You talk in your sleep, and you always hog the duvet, and you hate the smell of lavender, but you never told me that until after I bought lavender soap for the bathroom. He had stopped reading. The newspaper was still in his hands, but his eyes were fixed on some point in the middle distance, his face carefully blank. But I could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, could see the way his knuckles had gone white around the edges of the paper. I do not know who you are, he said quietly, still not looking at me. But you need to stop this. You need to get away from me right now. Before I could respond, before I could plead or demand or scream, he stood up abruptly, folding his newspaper and tucking it under his arm. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the opposite end of the carriage, moving with purpose toward the connecting door between cars. For a heartbeat, I stood paralyzed, watching him walk away, watching my dead husband flee from me like I was the ghost haunting him. Then something inside me snapped and I followed, pushing past the staring passengers, ignoring their whispers and pointed fingers. I did not care what they thought. I did not care if they called me crazy. I needed answers. I needed to understand how the man I buried was standing here breathing and walking and lying to me. He moved through 3 carriages and I stayed right behind him, keeping him in sight even as he tried to lose me in the crowd. We passed through first class, where businessmen looked up from their laptops with irritation at the disturbance. We passed through a dining car where the smell of coffee and pastries made my empty stomach clench. He kept moving, kept walking, always staying just far enough ahead that I could not quite reach him. Please help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking the subscribe button now. If you want to see how this story ends, subscribing ensures you will not miss any updates. Your support means the world, and it takes just 1 click. Finally, the train began to slow as we approached the next station. Edge Hill, the sign said. A suburb of Liverpool, still 15 minutes from my intended destination. David, or the man who insisted he was not David, headed for the doors, positioning himself to exit as soon as they opened. I pushed through the small crowd that had gathered, determined not to lose him. The train stopped with a hiss of brakes. The doors slid open. He stepped out onto the platform and I followed, my heart pounding, my legs shaky but determined. The platform was less crowded than Piccadilly had been, just a handful of people waiting to board and a few others moving toward the exit. The October wind was stronger here, carrying the smell of rain and diesel fuel. He walked fast, weaving through the people with the ease of someone who knew exactly where he was going. I hurried after him, my shorter legs struggling to match his stride. He went down the stairs, through the ticket barrier with a tap of a card I had never seen before, and out into the street beyond. Edge Hill was not a part of Liverpool I knew well. Rows of terraced houses stretched out in neat lines, their brick facades dark with age and weather. Corner shops with faded awnings. A pub on the corner with its lights already on despite the early hour. Cars parked bumper to bumper along the narrow streets. He turned left, then right, moving with the confidence of someone who had walked this route 100 times before. I followed him for 10 minutes, maybe 15, through streets that all looked the same to me, past houses where lives were being lived behind closed curtains and doors. Somewhere a dog barked. A car alarm went off and then stopped. The normal sounds of a normal neighborhood on a normal day, except nothing about this was normal. Finally, he turned up a short pathway leading to a modest semi-detached house with a small front garden. The garden was well maintained, autumn flowers blooming in neat beds, a tiny stone path leading to the red front door. He pulled out a set of keys, and as he did, the front door opened from the inside. A woman stood there. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and a warm smile on her face. She wore jeans and an oversized cardigan, and in her arms she held a baby, could not have been more than 6 months old, wearing a tiny blue jumper with elephants on it. David stepped inside and kissed the woman on the cheek, then took the baby from her arms, holding the child with the easy confidence of someone who did this every day. He said something I could not hear from my position on the street, still half hidden behind a parked car, and the woman laughed, reaching up to brush something off his shoulder. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek like he had given her, but a real kiss, the kind that spoke of intimacy and love and history. And he kissed her back, shifting the baby to one hip, so he could put his arm around her waist. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. All the air left my lungs in a rush and black spots danced at the edges of my vision. This could not be real. This could not be happening. David was dead. And if he was not dead, then he had faked his death, which meant he had left me intentionally, which meant the past year of grief and pain and endless mourning had all been a lie, a performance I had given for an audience that did not exist. The woman said something else, and they both went inside, David still holding the baby, the door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow I heard even from across the street. I stood there trembling, tears streaming down my face now without any attempt to stop them, my mind trying to process what I'd just witnessed and coming up empty. He had a new family, a new wife or girlfriend or whatever she was. A baby. A whole new life in this anonymous neighborhood in Edge Hill, while I had spent a year drowning in his absence. While his mother had cried herself to sleep every night. While his sister had stopped eating and had to be hospitalized for 3 days because the grief had broken something inside her. I do not know how long I stood there. Long enough for the rain to start, light at first, and then heavier, soaking through my coat and plastering my hair to my face. Long enough for the streetlights to come on even though it was only early afternoon, the sky so dark with storm clouds that the sensors must have been triggered. Long enough for neighbors to start appearing in their windows, looking out at the strange woman standing in the rain, clearly not okay, clearly falling apart in the middle of their quiet street. Finally, I made myself move. I walked up that short pathway, each step feeling like it took a year, and I knocked on the red door. Knocked hard enough to hurt my knuckles. Knocked with all the fury and confusion and betrayal that was boiling inside me. If you have been following this story and want to know what happens next, please subscribe to the channel now. We need your support to reach 1,000 subscribers. Just one click on that subscribe button helps us continue bringing you stories like this. The woman answered. Up close, I could see she was even younger than I had thought, maybe 26 or 27. She had kind eyes, the color of honey, and a smattering of freckles across her nose. She looked at me with concern, taking in my rain-soaked state, my tear-stained face, my obvious distress. "Can I help you?" she asked, her accent marking her as local to Liverpool, her voice gentle and worried. Behind her, I could see David standing in the hallway, the baby still in his arms. He had gone completely still, his face drained of all color. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw panic there, raw and undisguised. Then he quickly turned and disappeared into another room, taking the baby with him. The woman frowned, glancing back at where he had been standing, then back at me. "Are you all right, love? You look like you have had a shock. Do you need to come in and sit down?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Did I need to sit down? Yes. Yes, I very much needed to sit down. Preferably somewhere I could wake up from this nightmare. "That man," I said, my voice hoarse from crying and rain. "The one who just went inside. Who is he to you?" She blinked, confusion replacing concern on her face. "That is my partner, Michael."
Why?
"Do you know him?" "Michael." Not David. "Michael." "How long have you been together?" I asked, ignoring her question. She took a half step back, clearly starting to feel uncomfortable with this line of questioning from a soaking wet stranger on her doorstep. "Look, I do not know what this is about, but maybe you should go. If you need help, I can call someone for you." "Please," I said, and I was begging now, all pride abandoned. "Please just tell me. How long have you been with him?" She hesitated, clearly torn between compassion and self-preservation. Then she said, 3 years. We have been together for 3 years. We met at a pub quiz, if you must know. Now, please, I really think you should leave." 3 years. 3 years meant he had been with her while he was still married to me. 3 years meant he had been building this life, this family, while coming home to me every night and kissing me and telling me he loved me. 3 years of lies and deception, and a double life I had never even suspected. "What is his full name?" I asked desperately. "Michael Foster," she said firmly, her hand moving to the door like she was ready to close it in my face. "Now I am going to have to ask you to leave, or I will call the police." Before she could shut the door, David, Michael, whoever the hell he was, appeared behind her. He had put the baby down somewhere, and his face was set in hard lines that I had never seen before, not once in all our years together. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you need to go."
Right now.
The woman, his partner, his new life, turned to stare at him in shock. "You know her? Who is she, Michael?" He did not take his eyes off me. "She is someone I used to know," he said. "Someone from a long time ago. She is confused. Unwell. She needs to leave. Unwell." He was calling me unwell. I had found my supposedly dead husband alive and well with a secret family, and he was calling me unwell. "I am your wife," I said, my voice breaking on the last word. "We are married, David. Your name is David Mitchell, and we have been married for 5 years." You died in a car crash last October, except you did not die, did you? You faked it. You left me and you let me grieve for you, and all this time you have been here living this other life with her. The woman, Michael's partner, looked between us with growing horror. She put a hand to her mouth. Michael?
What is she talking about?
Why is she calling you David? It is not true, he said quickly, his voice calm but his eyes desperate. Naomi, you know me. You know who I am. This woman, she is clearly having some kind of breakdown. I have never seen her before today.
Naomi.
So that was her name. The woman he had replaced me with. The mother of his child. The one he had chosen over me. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, pulled up the photos I still could not bring myself to delete. Our wedding photos. Pictures from holidays. That one from last Christmas, just 10 months before he supposedly died, where we were both laughing at something stupid, his arm around my shoulders, both of us in those ridiculous matching jumpers his mother had bought us. I held the phone out to Naomi.
Look, I said.
Look at him. That is your Michael, is it not? In these photos with me. At our wedding. In our house. She took the phone hesitantly, her face pale now, her hands trembling slightly as she swiped through the images. With each photo, she seemed to shrink a little, her breathing becoming more rapid. When she finally looked up at David, there were tears in her eyes. Michael, she whispered. What is this?
Who are you?
He ran a hand through his hair, that old nervous gesture I had seen 1,000 times. Naomi, I can explain. Just let me explain. It is not what you think. Then what is it? She demanded, her voice rising, cracking. Because it looks like you are married. It looks like you have been lying to me for 3 years. It looks like our whole relationship is a lie. The baby started crying from somewhere inside the house, upset by their raised voices. Naomi flinched at the sound but did not move, just kept staring at the man she thought she knew, waiting for an answer that could somehow make this make sense. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button. If you are invested in finding out the truth of this story, subscribing means you will be here for every update. It takes just a moment and means so much to us. I was married, David finally said, the admission hanging in the air like smoke. To her.
To Sarah.
But that is over. That life is over. I am Michael now. I have been Michael for 3 years. I am not that person anymore. You faked your death, I said, the words coming out flat and dead. You made me think you were gone. You let me grieve. You let your mother and your sister grieve. Do you have any idea what this has done to them? To me? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second I saw something that might have been guilt or regret flash across his face. But then it was gone, replaced by a hard coldness I did not recognize.
You do not understand, he said.
I could not do it anymore, Sarah. I could not be that person, could not live that life. I was drowning. Every day I felt like I was suffocating, pretending to be someone I was not. I needed to get out. I needed to start over. So you died, I said incredulously. You staged a car crash and you died rather than just divorce me like a normal person. Do you understand how insane that is? There was an investigation, he said quietly. At work. They found discrepancies in the accounts. Thousands of pounds that could not be accounted for. I was going to prison, Sarah. I was looking at 3 to 5 years for embezzlement. I would not do that. So, I made a choice. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Embezzlement. He had been stealing from his firm. The firm that had spoken so kindly about him at his funeral, that had sent flowers and a generous donation in his memory. And instead of facing the consequences, he had run. Had faked his own death and started a new life with a new identity, leaving everyone who loved him to pick up the pieces. The car crash, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. The body, they identified. Whose body was it, David? Who died in your place? He did not answer. Just looked away, jaw clenched, refusing to meet my eyes. Oh my God. Naomi breathed. Michael, who died? What did you do? It was already planned, he said finally. I found someone who was going to do it anyway. Someone who wanted to die. I made sure he was in my car. Made sure he had my wallet, my ring. The fire did the rest. No one could tell the difference. He had assisted a suicide and used the body to fake his death. I was going to be sick. I actually bent over, hands on my knees, trying to breathe through the nausea rolling through me in waves. Naomi was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. The baby's cries had gotten louder, more insistent, but she seemed unable to move, rooted to the spot by horror and disbelief. "I need to call the police," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You need to face what you have done. You need to take responsibility." "Sarah, please," he said, and now he was the one pleading. "Please think about this. Think about what this will do. To me, to Naomi, to the baby, to your reputation. How will it look that you could not even tell your own husband wanted to leave you so badly he faked his death? People will talk. Your students' parents will talk. You will lose everything." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and realized I had never really known him at all. The man I had loved, the man I had married, he had never existed. He had been a mask, a performance, and underneath had been this person who was capable of such monstrous selfishness that he would rather let people believe he was dead than face the consequences of his own actions. "I already lost everything," I said quietly. "The day they told me you were dead, I lost everything.
You took that from me.
You do not get to threaten me now." I pulled out my phone again, dialing 999 with shaking fingers. The operator answered on the second ring, her voice calm and professional. I opened my mouth to speak, to report a fraud, a crime, a man who had come back from the dead. But before I could say anything, Naomi stepped forward. "Wait," she said softly. "Please wait." I looked at her, this woman who had been as deceived as I had, whose life was crumbling around her just as mine had a year ago. "I have a baby," she said, tears still falling but her voice steady. "A 6-month-old baby boy. His father, or the man he thinks is his father, he is all we have. I do not have family here. My parents are in Ireland, and we are not on speaking terms. I work part-time at a cafe, and that barely covers our expenses. If you do this, if you call the police, what happens to us? What happens to my son? That is not my problem," I wanted to say. "That is not my responsibility." But looking at her face, seeing the genuine fear and desperation there, I could not quite make the words come out. "Please do not subscribe just yet. I need you to hear the end of this first," I said, looking between them, and I knew that whatever I decided in the next few moments would define who I was as a person for the rest of my life. "Think about Martha," I said to David, to Michael, to whatever his name really was. "Your mother. She cries every single day. She keeps your room exactly as you left it. She talks about you constantly, about what you would have said or thought about things happening in the world. She is destroying herself with grief. Your sister had to be hospitalized because she stopped eating, stopped functioning.
You did that to them.
And you do not even care." His face was stone. "I cannot go back," he said. "That life is dead. I killed it. And maybe that makes me a monster, but I will not go to prison. I will do whatever I have to do to protect this life, this family." It was a threat. Subtle, but unmistakable. If I pushed this, if I brought the police into it, there would be consequences. For me. For everyone. I looked down at my phone, at the emergency call still connected, the operator asking if anyone was there, if I needed help. And I made a choice. Maybe the right one, maybe the wrong one, but it was mine to make. "I am sorry," I said to the operator. "False alarm. My mistake." I ended the call and looked at Naomi, at David, at this impossible situation that had no good answers. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "You're going to contact your mother and your sister. Not as David, obviously, but anonymously. You're going to let them know somehow that you chose to leave, that this was not an accident, that they should not blame themselves or spend the rest of their lives mourning someone who made a choice to abandon them. I do not care how you do it, but you owe them that much. You owe them the truth, even if they never know it came from you." He started to protest, but I held up my hand. "And you're going to pay back every penny you stole," I continued. "Anonymously, in installments if you have to, but you're going to make that right. Those people trusted you, and you betrayed them just like you betrayed everyone else. And if I do not, he asked, defiance flickering in his eyes. Then I make that phone call I almost made, I said simply. And I send every photo, every piece of evidence I have to the police and the insurance company and the papers, and I watch your new life burn down just like you burned down your old one. Your choice. We stared at each other for a long moment, the rain falling around us, Naomi standing between us like a referee in a boxing match. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and brief.
Fine, he said.
I will do it. I turned to Naomi, this woman who had been caught up in something not of her making. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. I am sorry this happened to you. I am sorry you fell in love with a lie. But you and your baby, you deserve better than this. You deserve someone real. She did not respond, just wrapped her arms around herself and looked at the ground, at the rain pooling on the path, at anything but the man standing beside her. I walked away then, down the short path, back onto the street, into the rain that had soaked me through hours ago. I did not look back. Did not want to see if he was watching me go, did not want to know if Naomi was already forgiving him, or if she was planning to leave. That was their story now, not mine. I walked back to the train station in a daze, got on the next train to Manchester without checking where it was going or how much it cost. Sat in a window seat and stared at nothing while the world rolled past in shades of gray and green and brown. Somewhere along the way, I stopped crying. Somewhere along the way, the shock started to wear off and reality began to settle in. If you have made it this far in the story, please consider subscribing to help us reach that 1,000 subscriber goal. Your support means everything, and it only takes one click on that subscribe button. David was alive. My husband, the man I had mourned for a year, was alive and had chosen to leave me, had chosen to fake his death rather than face the consequences of his actions, had chosen to build a new life while I drowned in grief. The finality of death had been devastating, but somehow this was worse. This was rejection on a scale I had not known was possible. He had not died. He had simply decided I was not worth staying alive for. When I finally got back to my flat in Manchester, it was dark outside, and I was shivering so hard my teeth chattered. I stripped off my wet clothes and stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing at my skin like I could wash away the entire day. Then I wrapped myself in my dressing gown and sat on the sofa with a cup of tea I did not drink, staring at the wall and trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with this information that had detonated my life for the second time in 12 months. I could not tell Martha. Could not tell Emma. What would I say? Your son is alive, but he does not want to be. At least not for you. Your brother chose to leave and let you suffer rather than face his mistakes. How do you give someone that knowledge? How do you hand them a gift and a grenade at the same time? But I had made him promise to tell them, in his own way. To give them some closure, some understanding that this had been his choice and not some cosmic cruelty. Whether he would actually do it, I had no idea. I had no leverage really, just the threat of exposure, and he had already proven he would do anything to protect his new life. Including, I suspected, getting rid of anyone who threatened it. That thought sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the rain. I was now the only person who knew his secret, the only threat to everything he had built. What would stop him from making me disappear too? Another accident, another convenient death that no one would question because I was just the poor grieving widow who never got over her husband's death. I could hear the whispers already, see the sad shaking of heads. She was never the same after David died, they would say. Such a tragedy. For the first time, genuine fear crept into my chest alongside all the other emotions churning there. I got up and checked the locks on my door twice, 3 times, pulled the curtains closed even though I lived on the 4th floor where no one could see in any way. Every sound in the building made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway. A door closing. The elevator ding somewhere distant. I did not sleep that night, just sat curled up on my sofa with my phone in my hand, ready to call for help at the slightest sign that he had followed me home. But nothing happened. The night passed slowly, agonizingly, and eventually the sun came up on Wednesday morning, weak and pale through the clouds. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did, and spent the day in my flat with the curtains still drawn, trying to decide what to do next. By Thursday, I still had not come to any conclusions. I felt paralyzed, caught between the desire for revenge and justice and the knowledge that pursuing either would hurt innocent people who had already been hurt enough. Naomi and her baby did not deserve to have their lives destroyed. Martha and Emma did not deserve to know their loved one had chosen abandonment over facing them. And I did not deserve to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if today would be the day David decided I was too dangerous to let live. I was sitting at my kitchen table on Friday morning, still in my pajamas, even though it was nearly noon, when someone knocked on my door. My heart leaped into my throat and I froze, staring at the door like it might explode. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Sarah," a voice called. "Sarah, I know you are in there." "It is Emma."
Emma.
David's sister. I had not spoken to her in months, not since she had stopped returning my calls. What was she doing here? Had David somehow contacted her already? Had he told her I knew? With shaking hands, I unlocked the door and opened it. Emma stood in the hallway looking thin and tired, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She was holding a large envelope in her hands. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly.
Please.
"I need to talk to you." I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into my small living room and stood there looking around like she was seeing it for the first time, even though she had been here dozens of times before. Finally, she turned to face me. "I got a letter," she said, holding up the envelope. "Yesterday. It was postmarked from London, but there was no return address. Inside was this." She pulled out several sheets of paper and handed them to me. I took them with trembling fingers and began to read. It was a typed letter, no signature, no identifying information. But I knew who it was from before I even finished the first paragraph. The letter explained that David had not died in a car crash, that he had chosen to leave, to start a new life, because he could not face the consequences of financial crimes he had committed, that his death had been staged, and he was alive somewhere living under a different name, that none of what happened had been anyone's fault except his own, that they should not grieve for him anymore because he had made his choice and he did not deserve their tears. There was a separate note for Martha, the letter explained, being sent to her house. And there was also information about anonymous payments that would be made to the accounting firm he had stolen from, restitution for his crimes even if he would never be held accountable for them. "He actually did it," I whispered, lowering the letter. "He actually told you." Emma was watching me carefully, her eyes sharp despite their exhaustion. "You knew," she said. It was not a question. "You already knew about this."
How?
I told her everything. About the train, about following him, about the house in Edge Hill and Naomi and the baby. About the conversation on the doorstep and the choice I had made not to call the police. About my fear that he might come after me to protect his secret. It all came pouring out in a rush, and when I finished, I was crying again, great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. Emma sat down next to me on the sofa and put her arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that for a long time, two women who had loved the same man and been betrayed by him in different ways, holding each other up because no one else could understand what this felt like. "What are you going to do?" I finally asked when I could speak again. "Are you going to tell the police? Tell your mother?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the letter still clutched in my hand. Then she shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I do not think I am. What good would it do? It would not bring back the year we lost. It would not undo the pain. It would just create more pain for more people. That woman you mentioned, Naomi, and her baby, they did not ask for this. And Mum, God, Mum has been through enough. If I tell her that David chose to leave her, that he let her grieve for nothing, it will kill her. Maybe not literally, but it will kill something inside her that is barely holding on as it is. So we just let him get away with it," I said bitterly. "We just let him live his new life, while we deal with the wreckage of the old one." Emma looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her 29 years. "He is not getting away with anything," she said quietly. "He is in prison, Sarah. Maybe not a literal one with bars and cells, but he is trapped all the same. Trapped in a life built on lies, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for it all to come crashing down. He can never come home, never see his mother or me, or any of the people who loved him, never use his real name or claim his real history. He has to live as Michael Foster for the rest of his life, and Michael Foster is nobody. He has no past, no childhood memories he can share, no old friends or family connections. He is a ghost pretending to be alive. That is his punishment.
I had not thought of it that way.
Had been so focused on my own pain and betrayal that I had not considered what David had given up when he chose to become Michael. He would never attend another family gathering, never celebrate Christmas with his mother, never walk Emma down the aisle if she got married, never be there for any of the moments that made a life meaningful. He had traded all of that for what? A few years of freedom before his stolen money ran out? A relationship built on deception that would collapse the moment Naomi learned the full truth, which she inevitably would. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe living as Michael Foster was punishment enough. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to support more stories like this. We are working hard to reach that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and your click makes all the difference. Just hit that subscribe button below. Over the next few weeks, a strange, new normal emerged. Emma came by my flat regularly, and we talked about everything except David. About her new job at a marketing firm, about my students and the funny things they said, about books we were reading and shows we were watching. We were rebuilding our relationship not as widow and sister of the deceased, but as two people who had been through hell and somehow come out the other side. Martha called me less frequently, and when she did, there was a subtle change in her voice. She had received her letter too, Emma told me, though we never spoke about it directly. Martha had not shared the contents with anyone, had not gone to the police or made any public statements. But something had shifted in her grief. It was still there, still heavy and present, but it had changed shape somehow. She stopped keeping David's room as a shrine, started talking about him in past tense with a finality that had not been there before. Started, slowly and carefully, to build a life that did not revolve around the son she had lost. I never told anyone else what I knew. Not my friends, not my therapist, not even my cousin in Liverpool who I eventually visited weeks after the initial trip, making up a story about why I had missed our plans that day. The secret lived inside me like a stone I had swallowed, heavy and uncomfortable, but impossible to dislodge. I did hire a private investigator, though, someone discreet who asked no questions about why I needed someone to keep tabs on Michael Foster of Edge Hill, Liverpool.
Just to know, I told myself.
Just to be sure he was keeping his promises about the restitution payments and not planning anything that might threaten me or the people I loved. The investigator reported back monthly. Michael Foster was still living at the same address with Naomi and the baby. He was working as a delivery driver, nothing glamorous, but enough to pay the bills. He had stayed out of trouble, no police contact, no suspicious activity. Just a normal guy living a normal life, or at least pretending to. And the payments to Henderson and Associates were being made, the investigator confirmed. Small amounts deposited anonymously into an account set up for victims of the embezzlement, money that would eventually make its way back to the people and clients who had been harmed by David's theft. It would take years to repay it all, but he was doing it. Keeping that one promise at least. 6 months after the day on the train, I went on a date. Just coffee with a teacher from another school that I had met at an education conference. His name was James, and he was kind and funny and nothing like David. We talked about lesson plans and difficult parents and the best coffee shops in Manchester. He did not ask about my past, and I did not volunteer it. When he asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime, I said yes. It was not love. It was not even close to love. But it was a step forward, a tiny movement toward a future that might contain something other than grief and betrayal. James never needed to know about David, about the train, about the man who had come back from the dead just long enough to kill whatever I had felt for him once and for all. 1 year after I saw David on the train, I finally sorted through the last of his things that I had kept. The blue jumper with the hole in the elbow went to charity. The wedding photos went into a box in the back of the closet where I did not have to look at them, but could not quite bring myself to throw away. The death certificate and insurance papers went into a file marked closed, because that is what this chapter was.
Closed.
Not resolved, not healed, but closed. Emma got engaged that autumn to a woman named Claire, who made her laugh in a way I had not heard since before David died. I was invited to the wedding and I went, watched Emma walk down the aisle in a beautiful white suit, watched Martha cry happy tears for the first time in years. David was not mentioned once during the ceremony or the reception. He had been erased from their lives as thoroughly as he had erased himself, and they were better for it. I saw Naomi once more, entirely by accident, at a department store in Manchester city centre during the Christmas rush. She was alone, looking at baby clothes, her son presumably at home with someone else. She had lost weight, and there was a hardness around her eyes that had not been there before. She did not see me, and I did not approach her. What would I have said? I am sorry your partner is a liar and a criminal. I am sorry I did not turn him in when I had the chance. Some things are better left unspoken. I did wonder, as I watched her comparing prices on tiny trousers, whether she had stayed with him or left. Whether she had forgiven his lies or decided her child deserved better than a father who did not really exist. Whether she lay awake at night wondering what other secrets he was keeping, what other bombs were waiting to explode. I hoped she had left. Hoped she had found the strength to start over the way I had. But I would never know, and that was probably for the best. If you have stayed with this story to the end, please consider subscribing. We are almost at 1,000 subscribers, and your support means we can keep sharing these stories. Just click that red subscribe button now. James and I dated for 8 months before I finally told him about David. Not the whole truth, I could not give him that, but an edited version. That my husband had died in what I had thought was an accident. That I had later discovered he had faked his death and was alive somewhere with a new family. That I had chosen not to report him to protect innocent people who would be hurt by the revelation. James listened without interrupting, then took my hand and told me he understood why I had not mentioned it before. He did not ask for details I was not willing to give. He just accepted this piece of my history and moved forward, which was exactly what I needed. We got engaged 2 years after that first coffee date. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, at a registry office in Manchester on a sunny Saturday in May. Martha came and gave me a hug that lasted a full minute, whispering thank you in my ear, though I was not entirely sure what she was thanking me for. Emma was my maid of honor and gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry. My cousin from Liverpool came with her husband and their 3 children who ran around the reception causing cheerful chaos. I did not think about David at all that day. Did not wonder if he somehow knew I was getting married, did not care if he would have approved or been hurt or been indifferent. He was a ghost from a life that no longer had any claim on me. I was Sarah James now, not Sarah Mitchell, and that felt like the closing of a door that had been left ajar for far too long. 5 years after the train, I got a call from Emma. She and Claire were expecting a baby through IVF, and they wanted to know if I would be the godmother. I cried when she asked, overwhelmed by the trust and love that gesture represented. When their daughter was born, a tiny perfect thing with Emma's eyes and a surprisingly loud cry, I held her in my arms and thought about David's son, the baby in the elephant jumper who is now old enough to be starting school. I wondered if he called Michael Foster daddy, if he had any idea that the man raising him was not who he claimed to be. I wondered if he would ever learn the truth, and what that would do to him when he did. But those thoughts were fleeting, pushed aside by the weight of the infant in my arms and the joy on Emma's face as she watched me hold her daughter. This was my family now. These were the people who mattered. The past was the past, and it had no power here. Martha died 7 years after David's fake death. She went peacefully in her sleep. A heart attack, the doctors said, quick and painless. At the funeral, Emma and I stood together at the graveside and watched them lower her casket into the ground next to the empty grave that bore David's name. It felt appropriate somehow, mother and son reunited in fiction, if not in fact. Robert, David's father, had passed 2 years earlier from cancer, never knowing his son was alive somewhere in Liverpool playing house with a stolen identity. Sometimes I thought that was a mercy. Other times I thought it was the cruelest thing David had done, letting his father die without ever knowing the truth. But it had not been my choice to make, and I had made my peace with that. They sold the family home after Martha died, unable to keep up with the maintenance and unwilling to hold on to a property filled with ghosts and memories. Emma sent me a box of things Martha had wanted me to have. Old photos, a necklace that had belonged to David's grandmother, a handwritten recipe book full of Martha's terrible handwriting and surprisingly good recipes. At the bottom of the box was a letter, sealed in an envelope with my name on it in Martha's shaky script. I opened it alone in my kitchen, James out at a work function, the house quiet around me. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs, but the words hit me like a physical blow.
Dear Sarah, it read.
I know what happened. About David being alive, about his choices, about your choice not to expose him. Emma told me everything a few years ago when I pressed her about the anonymous letter. I need you to know that I do not blame you for any of it. You were put in an impossible situation, and you did what you thought was right to protect people who did not deserve to be hurt more than they already had been. I am grateful for that. I am grateful for you. You will always be my daughter, no matter what happened with David, no matter who you marry or where life takes you. Please know that I forgave him, even though he never asked for forgiveness. I hope someday you can too, not for his sake, but for yours. Carrying hate and anger is too heavy a burden for a heart as good as yours. Live your life, Sarah. Be happy. That is all I ever wanted for both of you. Love, Martha. I cried harder than I had in years, great gulping sobs that left me shaking and exhausted. Martha had known all along and had never said a word, had never made me feel guilty or pressed me for details or demanded I make different choices. She had simply loved me and trusted me and let me live my life without the weight of her judgment. And she had forgiven David, had let go of the anger and betrayal and grief, and had somehow found peace before she died. I did not know if I could do the same.
Did not know if I wanted to.
Forgiveness felt like letting him off the hook, like saying what he did was okay when it absolutely was not. But maybe that was not what forgiveness was. Maybe it was not about him at all. Maybe it was about me, about releasing the grip the past had on my present, about refusing to let his choices define my life anymore. I do not know if I have forgiven him even now. Some days I think I have, that enough time has passed, and enough life has been lived that the betrayal has faded into something I can look at without flinching. Other days the anger comes roaring back, fresh and hot and all-consuming, and I want to hunt him down and scream at him until my voice gives out, make him understand the magnitude of what he did and what he destroyed. But those days are fewer now. Further apart. Most of the time, I simply do not think about him at all. I think about my husband James and the life we are building together. I think about Emma's daughter and the other godchildren I have accumulated over the years, children of friends who trust me to be part of their lives. I think about my students and lesson plans and summer holidays and all the ordinary, extraordinary things that make up a life well lived. 10 years after the train, I got one more letter. This one came addressed to me directly, postmarked from Glasgow, Scotland. There was no return address, and the handwriting was not one I recognized, but somehow I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Inside was a single page, typed like the letters Emma and Martha had received years before. It said simply, I am sorry.
For everything.
I know that does not change anything, and I do not expect forgiveness. But I needed you to know that not a day goes by that I do not think about what I did, what I destroyed, who I hurt. You deserved better. They all deserved better. I hope you found it. I hope you are happy. That is all I ever wanted for you, even though I went about it in the most cowardly, destructive way possible. I am not asking you to respond or acknowledge this. I just needed you to know. I am sorry. There was no signature, no name, but it did not matter. I knew it was from David, or Michael, or whoever he had become in the decade since I had last seen him. The fact that he had moved to Scotland suggested things had not worked out in Liverpool. Maybe Naomi had finally left him. Maybe his lies had caught up with him and he had been forced to run again, to create yet another identity and start yet another life somewhere new. Maybe he was still with her, still pretending, still building his house of cards higher and higher, knowing that eventually the wind would knock it all down. I did not care. His life was no longer connected to mine except through the thinnest thread of shared history. I read the letter once, then burned it in my kitchen sink, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. I washed the ashes down the drain and went about my day, meeting James for lunch, stopping by to see Emma and her family, living my life without the weight of David's apology sitting on my shoulders. Because here is what I had learned in those 10 years, what I had fought so hard to understand and accept. His choices were his own. His guilt was his own. His punishment, whether it was the prison of his false identity or something deeper and more personal, was his own. None of it belonged to me. None of it defined me. I was not the widow of a dead man or the victim of a con artist or the woman who had been betrayed so thoroughly she should never trust anyone again. I was just Sarah. A teacher, a wife, a friend, a godmother, a person who had been hurt and had survived and had built something good from the rubble. That was my story. That was my truth. And David, wherever he was, whoever he was pretending to be now, he was just a chapter one had closed a long time ago. Subscribe now if you want to join us on the journey to 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these stories coming and takes just 1 second of your time. Click that subscribe button.